Welcome, everybody. This is Two Chaps, Many Cultures. This is Wednesday for most of the planet. So I'm saying good morning from the East Coast of the United States. And I'm saying more morning to this chap over there. No, I never know which way to point. This chap over there in Chicago. And I'm pointing towards the other end of the globe, the other side of the globe, to our friend, our colleague, our special guest today in Seoul, South Korea, Tomomi Kumai. Welcome, Tomomi. And she needs to take herself off of mute. Oh, technology.
Hello.
Yeah, there we go. Hey, Tomomi, how are you?
Actually, that was my mistake.
Thank you for taking time at this time of day. It is so late where you are, so thank you for making yourself available, and we are excited to have you. Brett, what is the topic of the week? Remind us.
We are looking at identity, real or perceived and real. I think I had it the other way around. Sorry, I'm messing up our flow here.
Well, identity. And when we were discussing identity, we were thinking about who else could we invite to talk about this topic. And your name came up, Tomomi, because we've done some work together, and I know that you're born in Japan and you live in Seoul, and you have these two worlds, two hearts beating inside of you. One is Japanese and the other is Korean.
Right.
So, in your words, how would you describe your identity? Are you Japanese? Are you Korean? What are you?
Yeah, I feel really comfortable just saying that I'm mixed, or just stating some facts that I have a Japanese passport. I was born and raised in Japan until high school, the end of high school.
Mm-hmm.
But my heritage, my mom is Korean, my dad's half Korean. And then I have to start explaining why my nationality is Japanese, although I'm quarter Japanese, because in Japan, you were able to get only father's size nationality until 1986. Sorry, I'm not really sure, but 80s. So when I was born in the 70s, I was able to just get father's size nationality. Although he's half Korean and my mom's 100% Korean, I couldn't get Korean nationality. So it goes, every time I do the introduction, I have to kind of go through that family history, which includes the Korean, history, Japanese Korean history, because my mom and dad were born in, colonization period in Korea, both of them. So then I start, I speak a little bit of Korean history too. So yeah, if I talk about my identity, it becomes a kind of long story.
Right.
So I say easy ways: nationality, Japanese, and born in Japan, raised in Japan, but my heritage is Korean, and I live in Korea now.
And we brought up that comment from our friend Patricia, who says, "What are you?" A question that comes up a lot, and yet it can be uncomfortable. Did my question make you uncomfortable, Tomomi?
No, I'm really used to it, and I'm happy to talk about myself. So it never made me uncomfortable. But recently, one person, I was having this training with a Korean assignee, and I was introducing myself. And so my identity is really mixed because I was born here. But one question he asked, but which passport do you have? So I said, Japanese. And he said, then you're Japanese. So that was kind of like, okay, it's not that simple, but okay.
So, and we've had this conversation before, Tomomi and I. So I'm coming into this conversation with prior experience. So for those of you who are watching and wondering, why is he being so inquisitive with this sweet lady? Because we've known each other for a little bit, and we've done, Tomomi and I did a webinar together on doing business with Korea a couple of weeks ago, and there was one participant who appeared to be, I think by name, and I think I looked her up, she is from Korea, and she emailed me before the webinar and said, well, that'll be interesting, a Japanese explaining Korean culture. So does your name appear Japanese? Is that why Koreans think you're Japanese?
Yes, my name is both last name or first name, both Japanese names.
Mm-hmm.
So when you just look at my name, then probably you assume that I'm 100% Japanese, born and raised, probably having both Japanese parents.
Mm-hmm. So I know from the work that you do that before COVID made travel a lot harder, but before that you were often traveling between Japan and Korea for work. So home for you, where do you feel like you belong? Do you feel like you belong in both countries, or do you feel more belonging in one of them?
Yes, that's a really good question. I feel comfortable living in Korea, and maybe my personality is more or culture-wise closer to the globe smart Korean graph. I don't know. But it could be because I'm living as a foreigner, maybe I'm feeling comfortable because both Korean and Japan, living in your native country as a native, national person, you are expected to read the air and conform to the social norms. And if I'm in Japan, then I have all these things that I don't want to know, but I'm supposed to know with all my body. I'm supposed to feel. But in Korea, I can play different cards. Oh, my heritage is Korean, but I go, oh, sorry, I'm not, Korean, so I didn't know. Or I can play the foreigner card so that sometimes I can be intentionally or unintentionally not having this ability. In Korean, we call it nunchi, the ability to read. Sometimes I intentionally don't read. Sometimes unconsciously I don't read. But maybe that make me feel more comfortable living in Korea or maybe living in any foreign country. So
the expectation in Japan, the social expectation in Japan is higher or stronger by your experience.
Or maybe I feel that,
Yeah.
because I was born and raised. So even though I don't want to read, I'm kind of like reading with my skin, so expectations.
Reading with my skin. I love that phrase. I will remember that. That is a quality that most people in the West have, I think, trouble comprehending what that means, or even having the ability to read with our skin. And yet in many Asian cultures that's what people do in a way. Don't they? Yeah.
Right. So, if you're intentional, you can read with your eyes or feel it. But when you are born, you're supposed to just sense it with the skin. So a lot of times it's unconscious, right? So that's what we talk about as intercultural, trainer or coach, the bottom of the iceberg thing. Even the natives, who were born and raised there, because we were born and raised there, we don't know. Just like our language grammar, right? We speak, but that doesn't mean we can explain the grammar. So that's the part.
Very true. Very true. I wish I could explain my own
just
grammar.
like culture is like that, right? So sometimes maybe foreigner can explain better because they are the one who had to learn the language with the grammar. So same as culture. So I feel being in between Korean and Japanese culture, having as a Korean culture as heritage, and at the same time foreign culture, like really in between. I think that gives me the advantage to look at it from both ways. Like, yeah, I know the sound, I can understand the language, but at the same time, I also studied as something foreign from me. So that gives the
And you also have a strong connection to the Anglo world because you went to school, you studied in the
Yes.
United States. I think it's okay to share with the world that your husband is a U.S. person, right? So
Yes.
you're not isolated in those two cultures. You've been open to the world for a long time.
Right.
So I'm curious, do you speak Japanese with a Korean accent, or do you speak Korean with a Japanese accent, or
I
neither?
speak I speak Korean with Japanese accent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you and your husband, or when you and your family are in public together, do you stand out in Korea because you are not married to a fellow Asian person? Do people give you stares? How is that? How's the family identity perceived?
Yes, I think we stand out more. Maybe if it was just me and my husband, it's normal, especially in this city. Actually, outside of Seoul, but in this city, there is American military base. So people are used to seeing, different color of skin. But then when my son is there and he's calling me mom, his dad is Asian, so he is Asian. But my husband is African American. So, and then he's calling him, dad, and calling me mom. So maybe people who are not familiar with blended family, especially Asian people who expect, same race, especially the child looks Asian, and they're like, oh, okay, so that is
How
different
did that
than
happen? Yes.
right. So yeah, maybe, but then we don't really see people staring at us. Or it could be because I don't pay attention. That's why. But
But
we don't feel.
is it something that you think about? Is that something you and your husband are concerned about, the public perception, or is that not relevant in Korean culture?
I personally don't really care about how we are perceived, but I think in Korean society, maybe people think about it more. But I guess we don't really worry too much.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
I never
resilient.
thought about
Well, and
right.
when Brett created the social media post introducing you, he used a word that you used to describe yourself. Brett, what did you write?
The
What did
the
you write?
badass, the right, the
Vulnerably Badass Coach.
vulnerably badass coach, right? It is, yeah.
I
It's
love
a
that.
great way to describe it, which is not something, if we were to meet our perception from the Western purview, is when we think about Asia, we think about diminutive, almost submissive type of cultures, not something like badass, right?
Yeah.
This is kind of like a very Western concept, or even let's call it even an American so badass is not a negative term; it's actually a positive term to say I'm badass. I'm good at what I do. It is a boldness that is communicated from this culture. So this is your wonderful ability. And I was talking with Tomomi before the broadcast, and she was congratulating us on this show. And I said, well, this inspiration, of some of this inspiration came from you,
Yes.
but creating this YouTube channel that you have, bringing your vulnerability, your honesty, your pure self, right, to the camera. And just doing it in a way that's unfiltered and supportive of other people's insights as well. So that is a personal thank you to you. I want to do that publicly, not just privately as we did previously to the broadcast.
Thank
So,
We'll post a link to your YouTube in the comments later.
I'll go and find it now.
You gotta find it now, because you
Yeah.
gotta check out Tomomi's YouTube, everybody. So that is, yeah, you're is that. That's easy for me as a Western long nose to put a label to that, but to me it appears that you're really putting yourself out there. Maybe it isn't that. I don't know. Are you breaking rules, or are you doing something unconventional by Korean standards with your channel?
Well, Yeah, I don't know. I never thought about it that way because I'm just being myself. So maybe that's my life. I never thought about like is this. Well, I knew that I don't fit in Japanese society that much since I was
Mhm.
small. I felt that. And here in Korea, it's okay if I don't fit in because I'm not, Korean, and I can be a foreigner or someone who's having heritage. So yeah, I don't think about is this
I
Korean
love it.
standard or
I love it.
anything.
So
Yeah, but
you found a place in the world where you feel comfortable being who you are
this, yeah.
without judgment.
And then this vulnerably badass concept came from my adversity. I talk in one of the videos too, but having my son, who had brain cancer, and we had to fight for 4 years. So, and at that time, I realized that I was crying always, and sometimes, I was like, "Oh, it's too hard. I can't do it." But people told me, "You're strong." And
Mm.
my concept of being strong was, like really strong. But I said, no, I cry.
Mm.
And, I tell people that I can't handle this and I don't know what to do. And people say, no, that is strength, being able to show, the true feeling. So that's when I found out that being vulnerable is actually being strong. So that's why I came up with vulnerably badass. So I'm not saying like I'm always super strong, but I can show how weak I am. So
Mm.
that's the title. Yeah.
That's a concept that reminds me of Dr. Brené Brown.
Yes.
I'm sure you're familiar with her too. So, guys, if you haven't read the book or at least watch her TED Talk, or there's a Netflix special about Dr. Brené Brown, how vulnerability is actually a superpower and it's not a weakness. And in so many cultures that have been over centuries dominated by male role modeling, vulnerability has been being labeled as something that is weakness, and it's everything but, right. It's actually quite a force if you're using it in the proper way. So Brett has left the screen because we've seen a comment that is saying that we don't always see our guests because of closed captioning. I hope we're fixing that problem.
Okay.
That's this is our, I think, 13th episode, and this is the first time I'm seeing this technology. I hope it's all good.
I hope
So
they can hear me.
I sure hope so too. Brett, do you know what the studio wizards are doing there in the background?
We don't know. I don't know. I mean, we're just. I didn't realize that was the case. I have to go back and look at that. If that's an issue, we can't see the closed captioning, of course, and we know that it is part of the stream. And we were kind of encouraged that there is closed captioning, and that brings a whole other sense of inclusiveness to these broadcasts, but bit of a challenge if we can't see the most important person in this discussion. So I'm going to just remove myself a little bit. I'll be in the background listening. Don't worry about it. I know what you're doing.
You talk to yourself for a little bit, Brett. now, Tomomi, as we talked about earlier, we did, the two of us, we did a webinar together on Korean business culture, and we're following this up in a couple of days with a live training course that you and I, but mainly you have designed. I'm giving you most of the credit. So for those of you out there who are interested in learning about how to be successful in working with people from Korea or with working in Korea, Tomomi and I will do a course together, and you will find the details in the link that we'll post under the stream here. So if that is something that you are definitely interested in, or if you know people who should participate because they need that knowledge, send them our way. We love any introductions. We always love recommendations, and we love to plug into your networks as much as we allow you to plug into ours. Tomomi, what are we going to do? What are we going to tell people in that training course? What will they learn?
They're gonna learn about Korean values, and how these Korean values, motivate people to do certain things certain ways, which could be different from your culture, or it could be similar. And we will introduce, real examples, what happened with, some leaders, who come from different cultures and had to work with Korean people. And of course, we're not gonna talk about any identifiable information, but real examples that you can maybe relate. And then we will have group discussions to talk about your actual situation, or if you are not in the situation yet, something that you can expect it might or it could happen, so that you will have more hands-on activity, not just talking about something up here, but you can actually think about the situation, reflect on yourself, and then talk about what can be done. So it's going to be really workshop style.
Yep.
So it's not going to be just webinar where you can just sit there and multitask, but
and listen and type in your phone and turn off your screen and make breakfast nearby. No.
I want to make a comment, by the way. And Chris and I have done a couple of these type of trainings, but I also encourage Korean people to attend. Now, this is maybe a silly thing to say,
right?
But it is important because, in this work, we always identify that we're often blind to why we have certain tendencies. And so Korean business people really looking to be professionals in this realm would really benefit from this, to understanding where their cultural influences come from, and be able to perhaps explain this in some cogent way to their colleagues when they confront differences. So I often bring that up, and I think Tomomi is a wonderful communicator in that way, is to bring that perspective also as kind of an outsider, with that perspective of that Japanese perspective, looking inside what is a home culture. So just an insight for that. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree, because a lot of, not only Koreans, but also Japanese people too, we tend to think that these issues come from just the language barrier. And they feel like as long as they speak the language, then it's okay. But it's not actually only the language. It's closely related, but we need to also be aware of, cultural values and different ways that people are working. So yes, it will benefit.
I look forward to it.
People.
I look forward to working with you again, Tomomi, and those of you who will sign on, you can look forward to that as well. That'll be enlightening, and it will be fun, and will make you work. We're not doing it for you. We're doing it with you.
Definitely.
Thank you, Tomomi, for taking time so late in the evening. We're going to let you go to bed, or whatever it is you do at this hour of the day.
I'm going to go to bed.
Thank you very much. How do you say thank you in Korean? I should know this, but I don't.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다.
감사합니다. Yeah.
All right.
네.
In Japanese?
아리가또 고자이마스.
Arigato gozaimasu. I kind of knew that. So this is the thing. Many Americans have picked up Japanese phrases over the years because, I don't know, media, war history. But with Korean language, I don't see it being perpetuated. I live in a city in Atlanta where we have a really, really strong Korean base. But I still haven't picked up any Korean, so please forgive me.
No, it's okay. And younger generations are different thanks to BTS,
All right.
We're older generation, that's why.
Thank you very much. This was two chaps and a very fine lady from Korea and many cultures. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place.
Thank you.
See you guys. Bye.